August 26, 2020, regular meeting of the Schertz Planning and Zoning Commission. Item number 2, seat alternate is not required. Sorry, Jimmy. Number 3, hearing of residents. I thought I saw at least one sign up back there. No? Okay. Did anybody want to sign up and forgot? And looking at the comments, did we have anything emailed in other than these public hearing? Okay, so we'll just address those during the public hearing. Okay. Item number 4, election of Planning and Zoning Commissioner, Chair and Vice Chair. So I think the way I'd like to do this is we'll open the floor for nominations for chairman, and then we'll vote on that position, and then we'll open the floor for nominations for vice chair, and then vote on those nominations. Is that all right with everyone? All right, so at this time I'll open the floor. Nominations for chairman.
Nominate you, Chairman.
Okay, I have a nomination for myself, Glenn Outlaw from Commissioner Greenwald.
I second the nomination.
That was Mr. Platt. Okay. Do we have any other nominations? No more nominations? Okay, nominations are closed. Call for the vote. All those in favor of myself being reelected as chairman?
Aye.
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 I guess I'll vote aye. Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate that. Nominations are open for vice chair.
Make a motion to appoint Ernie as the vice chair.
Second.
You over there again for the second?
Your other ear.
My other ear, okay. Well, yeah. Yeah, one of these days I'll go see the hearing people. All right, so I have Mr. Evans is nominated for vice chair. Any other nominations? One more try. Any other nominations for vice chair? All right, nominations are closed. All those in favor of Mr. Evans, I assume you're okay with that? Okay. All right, all those in favor of Commissioner Evans being reelected as vice chair?
Aye.
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 And aye. All right. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Item number 5, consent agenda. We have 2 items this evening. Item A, minutes from the August 12th, 2020 regular meeting. Item 5B, PC 2020-025, consider and act upon a request for approval of a final plat for Unit 4 of the Homestead subdivision, an approximate 17-acre tract of land generally located about 2,000 feet west of the intersection of IH-35 North and Schwab Road, Guadalupe County, Texas. Commissioners, do either of these items need to be pulled for discussion? If not, Chair will entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the consent agenda items A and B as they are presented.
Okay, I have a motion for approval from
Second.
Commissioner Broad, and where'd the second come from? You know, I'm sorry.
Over here in the kids' chair.
No, I'm telling you, I heard it over here.
He bounced it off the wall.
All right, we have a motion for approval from Commissioner Broad and a second from Commissioner Haynes. No discussion on the consent agenda. I'll call for the vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. 7 ayes, no opposed. Consent agenda is approved. Item 6, we have a public hearing. Item 6, we have 2 public hearings this evening. The public hearing will be open to receive a report from staff, the applicant, the adjoining property owners affected by the applicant's request, and any other interested persons. Upon completion, the public hearing will be closed. The commission will discuss and consider the application and may request additional information from staff or the applicant if required. After deliberation, the commission is asked to consider and act upon the following requests and make a recommendation to the City Council if necessary. 6A, ZC 2020-008, hold a public hearing, consider and make a recommendation on a request to rezone approximately 2.94 acres of land from single-family residential/agricultural district and general business district to neighborhood services located northwest of the intersection between FM 1518 and Schaefer Road, City of Schertz, Bexar County, Texas, also known as DG Schertz Edition, Subdivision Lot 2, Block 1. Microphone's yours.
Can you hear me now? Yes. Cool. All right. So here is the aerial map of the location. Like I said, it's approximately 2.94 acres. The property is zoned single-family residential and agricultural district. Approximately all this right here, and then the front is general business. Here is 1518 and Schaefer Road, just to kind of get you associated to where this is at. Here is the public hearing notice map. This is the 200-foot buffer of the subject property. We did receive one opposed, and after the staff report and agenda was posted, we did receive one phone call for they were in favor of it. So there was 14 notices sent out in total. Here's the zoning exhibit. So this just kind of shows approximately 2.15 acres is zoned the single-family residential agricultural, and then about 0.79 is zoned the general business. This is just another aerial type view showing the location of the property with this yellow star. So to the north of this location is the Texas Heritage Daycare Center and a single-family residential lot. To the south is West Schaefer and then the commercial site for the Willow Grove. To the east, you have 1518, and then to the west is the single-family residential agricultural. So here is the comprehensive plan feature and land use map. So the proposed rezoning of the property to the neighborhood services is in conformance with the goals and objectives set forth in the comprehensive plan. The proposed zone change supports the low-intensity commercial objectives of the mixed-use neighborhood future land use designation. The neighborhood services district is intended to provide a low-intensity commercial services to adjoining neighborhoods. This meaning the subject property can become retail, small commercial, office, restaurant, civic space, and those types of businesses. So here is the current zoning. The adjacent property is that one that's already been zoned for neighborhood services. The sector plan describes the mixed-use neighborhood as a mixture of complementary land uses, such as residential and limited commercial development to accommodate the basic everyday services of the surrounding residents. The location is at the intersection of 2 roadways identified in the Schertz Master Thoroughfare Plan, so 1518 being the principal arterial, and then the Schaefer Road being the residential collector. This makes it an ideal location for low-intensity commercial. The proposed change will not only bring lower intensity retail to benefit the surrounding residents, but will also unify the development on a hard corner under one zoning, so providing a unified goal for the commercial development of the intersection. So at this time, staff recommends approval of the proposed zone change to Neighborhood Services District due to its compatibility with the comprehensive land use plan and the development around it.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Well, we can't hear you back there either, sir. If you can ask your question, if you'd like, when I open the public hearing. Probably be best if you just come up and ask your question. Not right now. Just hang loose. And then when we're done, staff will either answer those questions or they'll get with you and answer them. Okay? All right? So does the applicant wish to make any comments at this time? Not required, no? Okay, hang on. All right, so at this time I'll open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to address the commission on this subject, please step forward to the microphone, state your name and address for the record, and try to limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Just a question. Luis Sanchez, 11649 Cypress Barn. I was to bring this in person, but I just want to get an idea of what kind of businesses you're going to put in the area there, on the zoning there.
Okay, well, we'll hold that question.
I can hardly hear what we...
Yeah, sometimes it's an issue. Okay, so we'll hold that question, and then after we've closed.
Okay.
Okay? Anyone else like to address the commission? Going once? Twice? Close the public hearing. Would you like to answer that question real quick? Although I would, let me jump in here real quick. This is a zoning case, and typically the zoning cases deal with classes of use, okay? And there's a whole list of permitted uses of neighborhood services. While there may, and I'll let planning answer your question, but typically we don't consider a particular project when approving or disapproving a zoning request. But go ahead if you have an answer for him.
So the proposed,
So yeah, exactly what you're saying is correct. It's the specific project is not necessarily considered in something like a zone change. It's the actual zoning district. So for this specific case, the proposed zone changes to neighborhood services, which would offer a variety of lower intensity commercial uses. I know you're asking what specific things, so something like retail, restaurant, office, kind of the lower intensity, the less traffic necessarily commercial uses. There's a range of commercial zoning districts that we have: office, professional, neighborhood services, general business, neighborhood services on a lower tier of intensity. What do you ask?
it's not apartments.
No, this is a commercial zoning district, so not residential.
And sir, if you'd like to discuss it further, and you don't mind waiting till the end of the meeting, I'm sure the planning staff would be more than happy to speak with you one-on-one about it. Okay? All right. All right, commissioners, we'll open it for our discussion.
I would like for you to go back one of the slides. On one of the slides, current zoning, the one previous to this one, please, because it says there is a cause. The blue represents a cause on this property?
So this isn't necessarily that ACUS, like the APZ1, APZ2 zones. It's just the property directly adjacent to Randolph. And so there's a comprehensive plan future land use designation as air installation compatible. So it's not what you're thinking of like the APZ1, APZ2. It's just the air installation compatible future land use denotes land uses that are, I think, low density, lower intensity, things that are suitable around Randolph, but that's what that is, not the APZ1, 2, or the other zones.
Thank you.
Of course.
Hey, Nick, I have a question over here.
Go ahead.
The current Dollar General that's being built around the corner has one access into and out of off of Schaefer Road. The new zoning for neighborhood services, I would assume will have an additional access or entrance and exit to it? Or is everything going to be from the one exit and entrance?
So with the zone change application, we're not necessarily looking at kind of like access points for 1518 that would be governed specifically by TxDOT and then their review of the plat at that time, which has already been approved. I know this here is the mutual access drive. So this is where if you can follow my mouse, this other dashed line that's within the zoning exhibit actually connects these two properties with this singular access point onto Schaefer Road.
The entrance and exit is going to be in front of the entrance to the Dollar General. So if we have other businesses on the other side of that, it's going to create quite a logjam of cars and people trying to...
Are you saying here on 1518? Or are you saying on this?
I'm saying to the way the Dollar General is being built now, the entrance is facing 1518. The entrance to the lot is off of Schaefer Road. The only access to the entrance doors is going to be from either the parking lot to the south or go around to the east or the north. Now we're going to be putting in neighborhood service installations there with the new zoning. So I was wondering if that's going to be the only entrance to that entire property.
I'm not 100% sure if there's another access point under Schaefer Road. We can check that for you, or whether we would grant that. This is already zone general business, so that's kind of the reason for the inception of this mutual access drive. It was already there to account for the commercial next to commercial development, and this would be more of the same. This would be neighborhood services instead of general business there.
Right, I get that, and that's,
Okay.
as far as I'm concerned, that's good to have it all as one. I'm just concerned that there's only going to be one small entrance to that whole entire property, the 4.6 acres, I believe.
Right.
There's going to be delivery trucks coming in and out of that place, off of the collector there
Right.
on Schaefer Road,
Right.
Willow Grove.
I mean, typically we wouldn't want necessarily a number of entrances and exits onto a major road like a residential collector in the same vicinity. That could potentially create more traffic problems than a singular entrance and exit. And so when engineering, whoever reviewed the plat, and TxDOT as well, and their review along their roadway, I mean, the decision was made that this was kind of best from a traffic standpoint instead of the multiple entrances and exits that you could potentially see on Schaefer with people trying to get in and get out at the same time. I believe that could add, if not the same, even more traffic issues than necessarily just having one point. But I think it's I think it's already been accounted for with the mutual access drive. I understand that you're talking about here being existing RA and adding that NS to it. You're concerned with all of them being accessed via this one point.
Right.
I think a singular point could focus kind of the traffic into one area for that existing, 4 acres or something like that, wherever it's around there, instead of the multiple entrances and exits, which could also have problems for traffic.
Okay, one more question. That intersection, 1518 and Schaefer Road, is a accident, death waiting to happen there. You got the left turn lanes that you can't hardly see them. You got people getting off work, passing people in the left turn lanes to the left and onto oncoming traffic. I know you don't have control of this. This is a TxDOT thing, but in the future, are we going to be able to have a different set of like traffic lights with an arrow so people can turn left by themselves without having to wait for through traffic, and also crosswalks for the people across the street where the schools are to be able to access all of this stuff.
Right, I'm not sure if that's specifically included with the improvements to FM 1518 that TxDOT has planned in the future. For any sort of improvements like the light you're talking about, the addition of lights or the arrow of light, so to have a protected turn like you're talking about, could be generated by a traffic impact analysis. If that dictates that, the number of, trips coming in and out of the site, if that would dictate a protected turn, that's when that improvement could come into place. But again, I'm not 100% sure if TxDOT's planned improvements to 1518 would include something like that.
It might be
But we
something,
would defer to them.
might be something to suggest, because it's going to be a mess when they start, or after
Sure.
the widening of 1518. You have all the school buses and stuff, and then you have the intersection there at Schaefer Road and 1518. It's a traffic hazard with the lights the way they are now. So I just wanted to let you know. I'm sure you knew that, but
That's fine.
wanted to make
Thank you.
it local.
Anyone else?
I do have a question. It's something that we realize with the 1103 issue and the public utilities and the water lines coming in, there's already a waiver on this property. Is there anything in place right now, or a review, an impact statement of how that's going to be accomplished so we don't run into the issues that we have on 1103 with the autoplex that's being built?
With the extension of the line you're talking about, with the waivers on 1103. For this one specifically, the waiver is not to stop connection to the public wastewater system indefinitely. It's just to stop or to forego that immediate connection, that immediate extension of the public wastewater line at time of or before the plat would be recorded. Once it becomes available, they would be connecting to the public sanitary sewer. What's different about this situation, I think, is the distance from the existing lines. I think the one on 1103 is a little more confusing, like you were talking about, because there's only like a small gap, and it's getting over these small gaps. That's the hurdle. Here, it's just the sheer distance from any sort of sewer line that would be available. I remember doing the preliminary plat for both of the lots, and it was just thousands and thousands of feet away.
Excuse me, I think in general, in my opinion, neighborhood services is an appropriate zoning for this part of the city. I have some concerns, though, and I think we're partly, I don't want to say to blame because that's too strong a word, but when we rezone that corner lot, we kind of move the boundary between GB and neighborhood services. Because if you look at the zoning map right now, that GB is pretty much a straight, it's an arbitrary line that the city picked at some point. And we moved that line back 100 feet when we did the rezoning of the corner lot. So looking to the future, not so much here. I mean, if we were to approve this, that now moves that commercial zoning, if you will, and I'm trying to remember, I measured it, it's about 500 feet total from the interstate to the back of the, or from the 1518. The problem is when we take property owners and we arbitrarily split their property with these zoning boundaries. That's certainly a burden on the property owner. My concern is not so much with these, what properties you can see on this particular slide, but when you go further north, because theoretically in the future we could do, if the Spanleys wanted to rezone those two properties, we'd have a pretty straight line there. But once you get north of the Spanley property, those are long, deep lots. And so the question's going to come before us one day is where do we want to draw that zoning line, okay? I already have a few misgivings about moving it as far back as we want to move it on this zoning case, and certainly I would not want to see somebody take one of those long skinny lots and try to turn the whole thing into a GB or a neighborhood services. So it's kind of a philosophical at this point as to where we want to draw that line. One of the concerns, the gentleman that's in opposition that lives just to the west in that long skinny lot, that's his residence. And I'm sure, like most of us, he's concerned about having that some business backed right up. And of course, that was county property at one time, so you look at where his structures are in relation to the property line, and, you know, it's right there. Now, future development, if we were to rezone this neighborhood services, commercial zoning, neighborhood services would require what kind of buffer between that property and the residential?
It would require the 8-foot masonry wall along with the 20-foot landscape buffer.
20 feet, okay. Commissioners, any further discussion or questions for staff? If not, Chair will entertain a motion. And this will be for a recommendation to City Council. Oh.
I recommend, or I motion that we recommend the PC 2020-025 as approved to the council.
We have a motion to recommend approval from Commissioner Ray.
I second.
Commissioner Platt? Yep. Okay. Any further discussion? Questions? Call for the vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. 7 aye, no opposed. We'll recommend approval to City Council. Thank you. Item 6B, ZC 2020-007, hold a public hearing, consider and make a recommendation on an amendment of Part 3, Schertz Codes of Ordinances, Unified Development Code, Article 5, subsection 21.5.8, permitted use table to amend permitted land uses within the Main Street mixed-use zoning district. Emily?
Good evening, Commissioners. So as Mr. Outlaw stated, the UDC amendment proposed tonight is to allow 2 additional land uses within the Main Street mixed-use zoning district, specifically restaurant or cafeteria, which is currently only allowed with the approval of a specific use permit, and tavern, which inherently means bar here, which is currently not allowed at all within the Main Street mixed use. The proposed amendment would allow both of these by right if a zone change to Main Street mixed use was approved. So just as some background, on June 10th, a zone change to 603 Main Street was brought to you guys in order to try to develop one of the existing residential homes there into a restaurant. The initial request was to zone change the property to general business. The P&Z actually made a recommendation to City Council to zone it to neighborhood services with the understanding that that neighborhood services would allow the restaurant but wouldn't allow some of those more intense land uses that general business would allow. This zone change kind of started the conversation back up of why restaurant and tavern aren't allowed in Main Street mixed use, and kind of wanted to see a potential conversation about maybe creating a Main Street mixed use 2 that would allow them. On June 16th, the Main Street Committee did meet to talk about creating this Main Street mixed use 2, which would allow restaurant and tavern, but staff got the directive, rather than creating a brand new zoning district, which may be a little confusing, just to add these 2 land uses by right in Main Street mixed use. So on June 23rd, we did take that zone change to City Council, which is where we talked again about adding those 2 land uses and that a UDC amendment would be forthcoming. So on August 13th, 7 mailers, public hearing notice mailers were sent to all the properties that are currently zoned Main Street mixed use. At this time, we've received 1 response. I say 1, but he represents the 4 properties that you see here. So 3 of them are currently Main Street mixed use, and then the one that's got the green star that's blue, that's that 603 Main Street that was approved to be neighborhood services. So kind of doing the staff analysis, although property owners on Main Street could request a zone change to a different land use that would allow that restaurant or that tavern by right, there could be negative impacts to that by allowing those zone changes just to have the development of the restaurant or tavern, thinking about all the other land uses that would be allowed in those other zoning districts. So rather than doing that, by updating the UDC's permitted use table for Main Street mixed use specifically, it would allow property owners to develop restaurants, taverns, but would also make sure that those land uses that we don't want on Main Street, can't be inadvertently allowed. So based on the previous discussions here, the Main Street Committee and City Council, and by allowing restaurant and tavern by right and in Main Street mixed use without allowing additional unwanted land uses, staff is going to make a recommendation of approval of the Unified Development Code amendment, specifically just for restaurant or cafeteria and tavern and only in Main Street mixed use. So the rest of the permitted use table stays exactly the same. It's just these 2 land uses specifically just in Main Street mixed use. That's it.
All right, thank you. Okay, we'll open the public hearing at this time. Anyone in the audience wishing to make comments to the commission about this proposed change to the UDC is welcome to come forward. Always the big rush. Yeah. No one? One more time. Close the public hearing. All right, commissioners, floor is yours.
Commissioners, does anybody remember why we excluded these 2 items in the beginning?
I think when it came up originally, a part of the problem was that we didn't want to lose control over being able to keep our vision of Main Street in place and allow new properties and businesses to come up. I don't remember, however, anyone suggesting that the tavern or restaurant and bar be allowed by right. I thought we proposed mixed use 2 as a way to be able to approve it if we wanted to without losing that control of being able to stop someone from putting those businesses that aren't in, the vision of the Main Street plan in place, if I remember correctly.
Yes, but I think the question I heard was, and correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner Evans, is in the original, when the city first came up with Main Street mixed use, why did they exclude restaurants and taverns? Is that what you were looking for? Does anybody know why?
I personally was not here. I'll look to Lisa or Brian.
Got to get the big boss man to come up, huh?
Sit quietly back in the corner. I think at the time, frankly, it was a couple of reasons. One is it was a new district, new thing we were trying. We were just a bit more cautious. The idea is to be a little more conservative with it so as not to overstep and misstep and then create a problem going forward. The other thing I'll say, frankly, is that I think we tended to be generally, we tended to take the position that we felt the need to sort of regulate to prevent problems, whereas I think now the kind of feeling, just with time, is that we've maybe swung a bit the other way, and that, you can't necessarily regulate every problem away or prevent it from happening, and yet you kind of have maybe a lot of collateral damage with doing so as well. And so, again, I think the feeling is, in light of the direction we've seen, change on Main Street, the Main Street Committee in particular felt like, nope, let's make it easier. This is the direction we're kind of headed. Make it easier for folks to come in with those uses. But again, the process obviously is coming for P&Z, get a recommendation from you. I know council appreciates that, takes it under advisement when they make their final decision.
The main discussion I remember about these two items is parking issues, because they generate lots of parking.
They can generate a lot of peak parking, yes, sir.
Has our parking situation on Main Street changed?
It has somewhat. We have the city-owned lot. We also, the city entered into a contract to purchase another lot with parking on it. So our situation is changing. I think it's a bit of a chicken or the egg, maybe with the Main Street Committee, that it's hard to justify a need for additional parking if you don't have those uses generating a need for parking. And I think what the general commitment has been is the city's role, one of the city's roles on Main Street can be providing public parking. That's hard to do on a case-by-case basis. That we're probably better off with the city acquiring properties, providing those public lots, than trying to cram all that parking into the yard surrounding what was once a home.
But didn't we have a property owner buy a couple of lots and said that that's exactly what he was going to do, is he was going to level and put them in as parking?
We have, yeah. I mean, we've had the property, in fact, the city contracted to purchase had a structure on it that's being demolished to make way for the parking. I think there was a lot of discussion at the Main Street Committee and Council is, let's maybe kind of put forth something saying what our goal is with that additional parking, so that we don't necessarily have someone misunderstand and come take down one of the more beloved buildings on Main Street, as opposed to some of the buildings that maybe aren't in as great shape, probably could stand to kind of go that sort of thing. So, yeah, I think that's part of kind of what the idea is to try to make it easier so that, in part, I think what council wants to do is not have people have to pave every square inch of their lot to cram parking in with it.
So
Anyone else?
Is that the reason why the church, temple, synagogue, mosque, or other place of worship is a special because of parking?
I'm sorry?
The church, temple, synagogue, mosque, or other place of worship is marked as S for a special permit. Is that the reason that's not allowed, is because of parking?
It's probably not the case. I likely, and again, I'd have to refer to those with better memories than I have. I think we kind of went with probably an existing zoning district, plucked away some of the uses and modified it, but I don't recall that as being a reason there.
Yeah, Main Street has been an issue for a long time, and it's one thing when you're building a new Walmart or a new H-E-B or a new Chick-fil-A, where you can acquire enough property to meet driveway and parking limits. We used to talk about this often when I was working for the city, and my question was always, have you ever been to the Majestic Theater in downtown San Antonio? How many parking spaces does the Majestic Theater have? The answer is none, okay? And while that's quite a bit bigger scale than what we're talking about, the situation is the same down on Main Street. You have existing structures that people are trying to convert to new uses, and most of these were residential, so they're not large, they don't have a lot of parking. And so in my mind, the solution was always either public, some kind of public parking or joint use parking, where, to handle those kinds of issues. And I think the city is moving in the right direction. I heard when we heard the rezoning case, I think the applicant indicated he was doing some things to try to alleviate the parking problem. My concern here, number one, how many members on the Main Street Committee?
I think there are 4 council members on the Main Street Committee.
Okay, well, I was thinking because 4 would make a quorum. But anyway, there's at least 3. Okay. The other thing is, I don't have an issue with doing restaurants or cafeterias. Do we have a definition of what a tavern is? Is a tavern different than a bar? No?
Yeah, inherently tavern in our permitted use table is a bar.
Okay.
We don't have a bar, it's tavern.
So my only concerns here are that we're still dealing with, because it's not just Main Street. You've got what's right behind it, Exchange, which is still single-family residential. And so I'm leaning towards the noise issues, but I think we've talked about that before, where we have things in place to deal with those kinds of things. I like the approach here. I think it probably it is better just to amend MSMU rather than come up with a brand new one. A little concerned about the tavern, although we've got not counting the one that's down by the old post office. Mr. Marquez has one, correct? And I'm not aware that we've had any issues with his establishment, correct?
I don't think we've had significant theirs. Then many of you, I know, remember Thirsty Joe's, which is now the Main Street Social House.
Yeah.
I don't know if y'all.
It hasn't opened yet because of all the COVID stuff, but yeah, it's Main Street Social, something like that. Social on Main.
Or it's been open.
Okay, commissioners, no one has any further comments, or?
I do.
Oh, go ahead, sir.
We did send out some public notices, right?
Yes, so we sent out 7 public hearing notice mailers to all the properties that are currently zoned Main Street mixed use, since the UDC amendment directly affects them. Theoretically, anybody that's currently Main Street mixed use, if this were approved, could then, develop a restaurant or bar.
Do you have the map that shows the 200-foot boundary?
So since it's a UDC amendment, it's a little different. You don't have to notify property owners within 200 feet of every one of them. It's just the people that are currently with that zoning. So that's why it's all the properties that are in this like pink color.
Okay.
That's who received the notice. Because all the ones that are in pink are currently already zoned Main Street mixed use.
And as far as just another couple of comments on parking, I think the gentleman that was here a while back when we did the zoning change, he had mentioned that he had talked to Schertz Bank that they don't mind people using their parking lot when the bank is closed. So that's additional parking. And the city is redoing the sidewalks on Main Street, and sidewalks are looking pretty good. There'll be plenty adequate on-street parking on Main Street. I know it's crowded right now around the car repair shops. It's really crowded there, but they close at 5 and the street's empty. So I don't think parking is going to be an issue, but people are lazy nowadays. They want to park right in front of the business, but there'll be plenty of parking, I think, available along the street and across the street and down by the bank. So I don't think parking is going to be an issue.
Might lend itself to a good valet service. It might lend itself to a good valet service,
Yeah.
similar to what they do downtown.
Commissioner Ray mentioned valet parking, so there's an opportunity for a good entrepreneur. Emily, I'm sorry, I just realized that we had input from Mr. Marquez, and should we have read this during the public hearing? I can read it now, but...
Yeah, that'd be great,
okay.
if you don't mind.
And that was my oversight. This is an email from Mr. Nick Marquez of Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. And he says, I'm in favor of the proposed changes to the UDC as mentioned in the notice of public hearing letters. I represent 619 Main, 700 Main, 704 Exchange, and 603 Main Street.
So those are the 4 properties identified here with that green star. Those are all Mr. Marquez's properties.
Did we have in the past someone want a zoning change to put Main Street mixed use in another area that wasn't Main Street? I don't know why I remember that. I think somebody might have proposed it. I don't know if we did.
Not that I'm familiar with. The only one that I can think of since I've been here is the 704 Exchange, which technically has an Exchange address, and the driveway's off of Exchange, but at that time the goal was to use that whole corner together. But since I've been here, I can't think of someone wanting to zone something else Main Street mixed use.
Okay, thank you.
I have a follow-on. When Mr. Marquez was here and we made a determination on 603 Main Street, we specifically discussed restaurant and not tavern. At what point did that get added or come up? Did he request it? Did the city request it? Did your office request it? Where did that come into play? Because that wasn't even discussed last time when we talked about this issue.
So as I recall, when that zoning case hit council, some discussion occurred, and it was requested to be put on the Main Street committee agenda, and they then did. And again, I think harked back to the kind of Main Street plan, which is part of the comp plan, which, if you read it, kind of part of the goal is more of a 24/7 environment, restaurants, bars, things like that, as opposed to kind of shutting down. And so, again, I think for some of the folks who've been involved with it, for them it kind of reminded them, yeah, hey, that's an issue we've got. What do we need to do to kind of move that direction?
Yes. Yes, when I read this item, the implication, or maybe the assumption, was that the addition of taverns came from the Main Street committee itself. So, all right, Commissioners, once again, this is a recommendation on amending the UDC for the City Council consideration.
I have one last question.
Go ahead.
Is it, and it kind of bugs me, is we're going to be voting to change a special permit used for restaurant, cafeteria, and taverns, but we're still going to require a special permit for worship centers. And that's a First Amendment right. And I'm just curious to why that still is. Why is that still special and just not permitted with all the rest of them?
So I personally would have to do research on why the SUP was required when Main Street was originally created. You know, I think the UDC amendment that was brought forward was specifically from, you know, the conversations here, that zone change request, what Main Street Committee, you know, had in mind. So I believe we have to allow churches and temples in every zoning district at some point. So if an SUP is approved, you know, they get that right. To me personally, when I think about Main Street anywhere, you think Fredericksburg, even just Cibolo, like restaurants and taverns and bars, to me, and like retail shops are like the thing that you go to Main Street for. It's just my personal opinion. For what it's worth.
I'm just curious, Emily.
So I can
question that
I can definitely do more research on it, but
question I needed to ask. That's all.
Yeah.
Well, if no one has any further discussion, questions, or comments, we certainly entertain a motion. Yes, sir.
I'd like to submit a motion to deny as proposed and have it change to include language currently require approval of a specific use permit for taverns. I think restaurants and cafeterias would be fine, but I'd really like to be able to keep that vision of Main Street and have some kind of control over where that vision goes instead of giving up what we have right now.
We have a motion from Commissioner Platt, basically to deny the application or recommend denial of the application as submitted, unless amended. I'm not sure how to do this. He's okay. The motion is okay with restaurant or cafeteria, but require an SUP for a tavern, correct? And if you would, I think if you'd rephrase your amendment rather than denying, if you would, I think it would be better if you motioned approval to approve or recommend approval of restaurant, cafeteria, but require an SUP for a tavern. Does that make sense? That's kind of what you want to say, right?
Yeah.
Are you okay with those words?
Yes, sir. A motion to approve restaurant, cafeteria allowed by right, and to amend tavern to require SUP.
Hey, Commissioners, do I have a second? Okay, one more time. Do I have a second? It appears we do not have a second. So, not sure what the phraseology is, but I think basically that emotion is dead.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the Main Street mixed-use zoning district as presented. Recommendation to council to approve.
I have a motion to recommend approval to City Council from Commissioner Greenwald. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
You. Okay, and a second from Commissioner Broad. Any further discussion? Call the vote.
Nay.
Aye.
Aye.
No.
Aye.
No.
And I'll vote aye. So if I did the math right, that's 4 ayes and 3 nays. Is that correct? Okay.
And if Chairman Outlaw, if you'll permit me, if the 3 commissioners that voted nay, since this does go to City Council, I'll need to include kind of in my CCM why the nay votes were cast, so City Council can take those into consideration. So if each one can just indicate why.
Well, go ahead. I don't need to speak for you.
Again, I'd like to see that amended to require SUP for a tavern.
Thank you.
And I'd just like a reason, I'd like a reason to know why the church temple portion, we couldn't get an answer on that. And I can't move forward approving the other 2 without having this mentioned to me in further language. Then I need to check on it. And I understand.
The discussion was not complete, so we needed more time, more discussion. We weren't ready for this item.
I'm sorry, we're just having a little discussion about your chart there. And what I was trying to explain is that where it says currently requires approval of a special use permit, that is the current MSMU zoning.
Mhm.
And if council approves this proposed amendment, both of these uses will then, that SUP will go away, and both of these will be by right. Correct?
That is correct.
That help? Okay.
Good.
All right, thank you. Move on to item 7A, a workshop discussion and a public hearing regarding pit pads, short-term rentals.
Okay. So let's start the conversation, I guess, with what are short-term rentals. The city UDC does not include a definition of what a short-term rental is, but it's generally defined as any rental that is for a period of less than 30 consecutive days to an occupant, typically in a residential dwelling unit, may or may not be owner-occupied, and they are required to pay the hotel occupancy tax. And then what are pit pads or midterm rentals? So again, the city's UDC does not include a definition. They're generally defined as rentals that are greater than a month but less than 6 months. Same thing, typically in a residential dwelling unit, and then same may or may not be owner occupied. So the midterm rentals in this area are sometimes called pit pads or crash pads. They are designed for military members that are on temporary duty assignment. And then PIT, just for kind of general understanding, stands for Pilot Instructor Training, which takes place on Randolph. So when we previously brought this forward to both P&Z and City Council, some of the general concerns that some of the residents brought forward were amount of people that actually live in those or occupy those short-term rentals or pit pads. For the midterm rentals, noise levels, extra vehicles parked in the roadway, blocking driveways or sidewalks, trash and debris, possible decreased property values, things of that nature. Some background, so in 2019, in June of 2019, we brought kind of the same, very same presentation to P&Z with the recommendation of no additional regulations, but if there was a change in conditions, staff would come back and have that conversation with you guys. At that time, P&Z concurred that additional regulations would be preemptive, so on June 25th, planning staff provided basically that recommendation to City Council that at that time, no further regulations would be considered. So the current update, the current status, no new concerns that we're aware of. I did speak with our code enforcement, and they have not received any new complaints that they could think of. This time, no change in condition, really, that staff is aware of, but this item was requested at a previous P&Z commission, so we did want to bring it forward for that conversation. But staff is going to make that same recommendation. We're going to continue to monitor for any changes. If we, start seeing those changes, have more of these pop up in the city, get more, have any code enforcement complaints, things of that nature, we'll bring it forward to the P&Z commission again for discussion. But at this time, don't want to create any additional regulations, still preemptive with the amount that are in the city. That's it.
All right, thank you. And we have this marked as a public hearing. We'll open that public hearing. Anyone in the audience like to address the commission on this topic, please feel free to step up to the microphone. No one wants to speak? Close that public hearing. All right. Commissioners, the floor is yours. I don't know, I don't remember who requested this. Was that you, Commissioner Broad, or?
Commissioner
No,
Haynes.
I thought we had one already.
That was me.
Oh, okay. Well, why don't you start things off then?
Yeah, I requested that. We had a lot of discussion on our internet webpage for Willow Grove. Excuse me. And being involved with the homeowners association, I was asked to bring it to the commission or to the city council meeting, and I did. And it was tabled for some time this year. And I asked Emily a couple months ago where they were on it, and it looks like they made a decision, and we haven't had any real problems since then in the development, so I appreciate your time and your efforts. Thank you.
Of course.
On which HOA commission board are you on? Which HOA were you talking about?
Willow Grove.
Okay. Just my 2 cents worth. I haven't heard anything about pit pads or crash pads since our previous discussion some months ago. Haven't heard a thing.
I think maybe word got out to Randolph about the conditions that some of these trainees, the pilots, were leaving. And they've cleaned up their act a lot. It hasn't been a problem ever since we had our first discussion, so once again, thank you.
All right, well, hopefully staff and particularly code enforcement will stay on top of that, and maybe just kind of keep this as an open item in the future if things change or you get some new information, maybe you bring it back to us. Commissioners, anything else on this item? Okay, we'll move on to 7B, a workshop discussion and public hearing on public school exemptions.
Or you can be wherever you want. Actually, why don't you sit down? I'll sit down on this. Good evening. Okay, so again, another commissioner requested workshop regarding the exemptions for the development of public schools within the Unified Development Code. So kind of as a history of these exemptions, there's an interlocal agreement between the City of Schertz and SEUC-ISD to adopt these public school exemptions. The main goals of that interlocal agreement were streamlining the development process for public schools, as discussed in these meetings with City Council, promoting the safety of the students through increased site visibility. The interlocal agreement and resolution authorizing it was adopted in 2012, and then the UDC amendment with the resulting exemptions was approved in 2016. So what are the exemptions? There's a number of them. They can be kind of put into three separate categories, I would say. The first one you'll see is the parking exemption. So for public schools, parking space and stacking requirements are based on an independent study provided by the applicant to city staff that requires approval before it can be applied to the site. We also have landscaping requirements. The first one is the parking area landscaping requirements. Public schools are not required to meet those, so the traditional tree in a parking island that occurs every 12 spaces or at the end of a row, or the kind of shrubbery screening those headlights. They are exempt from the tree mitigation and preservation requirements. They are not held to the additional regulation calling for 1 tree per 20 feet that's applied to the arterial roadways in the transportation section of the Unified Development Code. 1 tree per 50 feet of, like it would be on all other city streets, is applied here. And the base landscaping installation is 4 trees per acre instead of the traditional 9. There's 2 others, and there's site design elements, I would say. They do not have to construct the masonry wall when adjacent to the residential zoning districts or uses. And they also don't have to meet the minimum exterior construction and design standards. And that's kind of a lot of words for basically they don't have to meet the articulations after the rest of the requirements in that section were removed. So the applicability of these UDC exemptions. So how it's written in the code is that they apply to all public schools. So I kind of want to give an example of how it's written in the code. There's not a specific section that says, oh, this is on public schools, these are the exemptions, and then these are where it applies and how it applies. On the different site design elements, the different requirements in the code in Section 9, it'll just say something like this. Section H does not apply to public schools. Different kind of wording for the different requirements, but that's how it's presented. And then left with that, we go to the definition for a public school within the Unified Development Code, which says it includes elementary, intermediate, middle, junior high, high, and alternate schools operated by a public school district, emphasized here, but does not include administrative or support facilities and buildings not located on a school campus or do not solely support one campus. And so while the UDC does provide a definition here for public school, that they are these facilities operated by a public school district. It does not offer any definition for any sort of other type of schools, namely private schools or even charter schools or something like magnet schools. It just sticks to public schools. So kind of the main topic today is about why these exemptions, or the relationship between the exemptions and charter schools. So just to start off of this part of the discussion, I kind of want to briefly go over what are charter schools. There's a number of misconceptions about them. In the state of Texas, charter schools are public schools that operate via contracts with an authorizer. So that's from the Texas Education Agency. Basically what the authorizer means is that it's an entity that kind of verifies that this charter school exists and verifies that it's functioning and running as a charter school and kind of oversees that. The authorizers can range from a number of different sources. They could even be authorized by local school districts, such as SUCISD, or independent organizations. In Texas, there's also the Texas Charter Authorizing Office that oversees the entire state's charter portfolio. They are public schools, tuition-free, open to all on a first-come, first-served basis or through a lottery. And then they also have the autonomy, kind of one of the main differences here between public schools, to tailor their curriculum, personnel, and budget based off of this contract they have with the authorizer, which is their charter. So to kind of visualize a bit more similarities and differences between the public and charter schools, some main categories we want to talk about where there's differences and similarities. Funding, so they both receive public funding a bit differently. However, charter schools are funded publicly through a per student basis, whereas traditional public schools levy local taxes, local property taxes. They also are funded partially through state budget funding. But again, that's the main difference for theirs, the funding sources. Traditional public school districts can levy local property taxes. For government regulation, both schools must adhere to kind of state laws. However, the charter schools are independently run and then also have to meet the requirements of their charter or that contract that they are able to customize. And then for public schools, the local school board runs the district. Teacher certification, for traditional public schools, it's just the state education board needs to certify the teachers. For certifications for charter schools, it's different for state to state. For Texas, I believe it requires a degree as well as to be registered with the state, except for, I think, the ESL teachers and the special education teachers. So it's pretty largely similar. Curriculum flexibility, again, the Board of Education kind of defines the curriculum for public school districts, and for charter schools, it's run by their charter, their contract, and the application process. So this is one of the larger misconceptions for charter schools. They do have an application. They are not required to take an entrance exam, or they can, the schools cannot discriminate against the students that they're admitting to the schools. Whereas traditional public schools, you're just like, well, where's my school based on where I live? For the most part, that's where they're going, and they don't necessarily have to apply. For charter schools, there is an application, but it's free. It's just to apply to the school, since it's a choice school. So these are the kind of key points from that. They're both free. They both don't discriminate against the students that they admit to their schools, both receive public funding, and are required to meet the state accountability requirements by the Texas Education Agency and administer those state tests that we all took as kids. And how they're different is the actual source of the public funding. Charters receive that state funding on a per student basis, how many kids they actually have at the school, whereas the traditional public schools receive it, like I said, by levying the local property taxes. And then their autonomy within their specific operations, the day-to-day, charter schools can make those adjustments to tailor it to their specific school and students by developing a customized curriculum or personnel or budgets through their charter that has been pre-established and then is governed by whoever the authorizer is. So why the exemptions for charter schools? So kind of for staff rationale on this one, I would say the primary goals of the interlocal agreement and the resulting UDC exemptions that I listed were to, again, streamline the development process for this public schools for public education and adopt regulations that would promote the safety, as talked about in those meetings with City Council, for the welfare of the students. While the interlocal agreement was between the city and a public school district, SUCISD, the argument for both of these cases is valid for other public schools. the argument to streamline development process for public education. Charter schools are public schools. It would have the same purpose in promoting the safety during the kind of hectic times that can be pick up or drop off, or making sure a lot of the requirements you'll see are these reduced trees, these reduced islands, to kind of open the vision field during these pick up, drop off times where it can be hectic, just to keep everything safe, keep more eyes on every kid kind of going in and out. And while they're not in the definition for a public school strictly by our UDC, they are public schools. They are independently run public schools. Like the definition from the Texas Education Agency, they are public schools, and so the exemptions, the purpose of the exemptions behind them does apply to these types of public schools as well. So the reason for this being brought up in particular was in relation to one, I know as Commissioner requested, I think it was Commissioner requested after we read something from a hearing of residents from someone regarding the School of Science and Technology project being kind of developed by Building Hope, that organization. So we thought it'd be kind of prudent to go through exactly what the requirements mean to Building Hope and SST, and to kind of give an overview of that organization, since that was the reason it was kind of brought up in the first place. And Megan's going to be going over those requirements.
Hello again. So like Nick said, so Building Hope is the
I have to turn my own microphone on. You're a very quiet spoken person, and I'm the PA, so if you didn't mind, maybe a little bit closer and a little bit louder. Okay? Thank you.
I can do that. So Building Hope provides the finance and the real estate assistance for this site for the School of Science Technology development. The SST requires no admission fee, but at this time for this charter school, there is the application, as Nick said previously, that they do apply. But for this, they have the random lottery process. The SST is a self-governing, so students are not required to live in a specific zip code to apply for the enrollment. SST has a volunteer unpaid board of directors. So the board nominations can be made by anybody. That means the existing board members, SST employees, parents, alumni, and even general public. So parents, even members of the public have the opportunity to provide the local feedback through board nominations and elections. So this is very similar to the public input opportunities for public school districts. The existing board reviews the qualifications of the nominees, seeking individuals who have the expertise, experience, or leadership abilities that will contribute to maintain a continued standard and excellence of the SST. So kind of getting more in depth with these UDC exemptions. So as you can see, I don't know where my mouse is. There it is. So other development for a general business zone site, the 9 trees per acre would be the requirement, but for the SST site, it's 4 trees per acre minimum. Then going to the tree preservation of 25% protected and heritage trees. So the mitigation fees for protected trees is the $100 per inch, and then for the heritage is the $300 per inch. For the SST charter school site would be the no preservation mitigation fees required. The arterial roadway perimeter, so 1 tree per 20 feet along arterial roadways. For this example, the I-35, and the 1 tree for every 50 along other roadways. The SST site is the 1 tree for every 50 feet. The parking area landscaping requirements, so the parking islands that require at every 12 spaces, a tree is required in that parking island. At the terminus of every parking row. For the SST side, there is no parking landscape minimums. For exterior construction and design requirements, the GB zone subject site would have the horizontal articulations required on a wall greater than 50 feet in length, and the vertical articulations required on all walls. For the SST site, there is no minimum horizontal or vertical articulations required. Tree preservation and mitigation requirements, so it's not adjacent to residential zoning, therefore there is no additional screening or buffering required. That would go for both the GB and the SST site. Parking standards, both are required to provide a parking study that it would be reviewed and by city staff. So even though there is no exemption for public schools regarding the requirement to perform a traffic impact analysis, a TIA, public schools do not have exemptions to public infrastructure improvements. So a TIA was approved for the SST site with the following results. A median cut on Fairlawn Avenue was denied by the HOA. That HOA is the Riata HOA. A mandatory construction of a right turn deceleration lane was to be put on Fairlawn Avenue. So kind of a recap, the intent of the interlocal agreement was just to, again, streamline the development for the public schools. So to promote the safety, to increase the visibility around public school sites. Like Nick said, the picking up, dropping off, children coming in and out, it can be very hectic at times, so trying to eliminate that. Staff has interpreted the charter school to be included in the UDC exemption for public schools for these following reasons. Charter schools are public schools even if not included in the UDC definition. So they are free to attend, can't discriminate against students, they receive state funding, they do have an elected and non-paid board of directors. So very similar to public schools, they are allowed to have general public feedback. Charter schools have the same visibility concerns just like public school districts. Since the safety concerns are based on the land use, public school, it would make sense to apply those exemptions to this charter school.
All right, Megan, thank you very much. Do you have anything else, Nick? Okay. So we have this marked for public hearing. So I'll open the public hearing.
So we did receive one response from John Sullivan, who resides at 513 Triple Crown. So he indicated charter schools are often built on small lots with dense parking and heavy impervious cover. They are often built to maximize value use of the owned land, usually with the idea of utilizing the surrounding area's public right-of-way with little regard for the surrounding environment. This is a school transportation model where almost every student is driven to school by car. When exemptions for public schools were put in the UDC, it was brought up that public schools have an elected school board, and if the local community did not like something that was being built, there was an opportunity for public feedback and even elected officials to hold accountable. Since charter schools are operated more like a business and often do not even have any local ties to the Schertz community, there is a lack of public accountability with this business model. It is no surprise that charter schools are building on valuable I-35 frontage, given Schertz is seen as a pass-through community, and there is visibility convenience on I-35 for commuters. This is not the same as the local public school model, where schools are built to serve local neighborhoods and encourage less individual car traffic.
Thank you, Emily. Anyone else like to address this issue? Once? Twice? Public hearing is closed. Commissioners, if you don't mind, I think in response to Mr. Sullivan's comments, I asked for this to be on the agenda. So if you don't mind, I'll start out this time. Nick, you're getting pretty good at reading my mind, okay? One of the first things I wrote down was private versus public, you know, and the definition. And we started out, we're in the UDC. This is not by the UDC definition of public school. But your analysis indicates it should be. So it's probably an obvious question, or the answer is obvious, but I think we can talk about, and I'm sorry, this was the science, the SST.
School of Science and Technology.
Because that is the project that generated the discussion. So when they come in with building plans, development plans, your intent or zoning or planning department's intent would be to treat them as a public school and make the same UDC exemptions available to them, yes?
Yes, that would have been the intent.
Does anyone know, public school property is tax exempt, it's off the tax rolls. Does anyone know about charter schools? Are they property tax exempt as well?
I'm not sure. Dan, do you know? I'm not sure if they're property tax exempt.
I mean, if you don't know, that's okay.
I don't know.
But often they're nonprofits. They're set up as a nonprofit, so it would be tax exempt. I don't think that's a requirement, but most of the ones I've dealt with are set up as a nonprofit.
Okay, thank you, Mr. James. And I'm wondering, as we went through your presentation, one of the obvious differences between a public government school, for lack, to differentiate, is they have to take everybody. They're not size constrained. If they can only handle 500 students and they get 700, they've got to find a way to accommodate them. Whereas charter schools are just the opposite. They can build their facility for 100 students, and that's where the lottery comes in. They're only going to take 100 students. The other thing is while there is some mobility within the public school system where you can apply and have your child go to a school, even in another school district, the whole charter school thing is wide open. We can build that charter school at Country Club in 35, and students from New Braunfels or anywhere can attend that school. Okay. So in my tiny little brain back here, the question is, what is the motive for a charter school? Okay. Public schools, the school districts don't have a chance, they don't have a choice. They're out there to educate the kids, and they do that at our expense with property taxes and all that. But what's in it for a charter school? And Mr. Sullivan calls it a business model. So it's, and the other thing that bothers me a little bit is private schools, and the one that pops into my mind is the Catholic school up on 482, and I apologize for not remembering the name of the school. You consider them a private school, yes? Okay. But their function is the same as a charter school or a public school. They're there to educate the kids. So in building a private school, as you say, wouldn't these same visibility and safety and other concerns apply to them as well? Okay. All right. Let me get to my bottom line question. I understand that the neighbors in Riata, they don't like this project. And again, it's one of those things where we just didn't have a crystal ball, and we didn't see the impact of allowing them to keep that median as private property, okay? Because that's what's creating the problem. If we could cut that median, there wouldn't be a traffic issue. They'd turn left and go back out to the access road. Okay. But where I'm going with this is, what in the, Mr. Sullivan is very articulate in expressing his, he talks about dense parking, heavy impervious cover. So the parking do we make allowances for parking or just parking lot landscape? Do we apply, in other words, if I'm going to build an elementary school, you've got a table that says for so many students or so many, I've got to have X spaces, correct? Do you apply that same chart to a charter school?
So whatever kind of study they would provide, whatever basis they're founding their argument for providing a number of spaces. So they don't say, we want to provide 500 spaces, do you agree that that's enough? They have to provide evidence about, SCE codes about why, like how this is regulated, what is their rationale behind how many parking spaces for this land use. It's then reviewed by, like, some in our engineering department, John Nowak, who would review like a TIA or any other parking study that we would necessarily go through. So it'd be looked at in very similar fashion to something like that. So the parking standards is for a school that's in a public school district versus something like a charter school would be looked at in the same way.
Okay. How about the heavy impervious cover? Is there any waivers or?
No, there's no impervious coverage exemptions for public schools that are in the UDC.
So what I'm fishing for here, Nick, is if we were to remove all the exemptions, if we amended the UDC and we took out all these exemptions for schools, okay, what, if any, difference would that make to this project on 35 and Country Club Boulevard, in your opinion?
As to the viability? I don't know if I could speak to the viability of the project.
The implication here is that we've made these exemptions to make things easier for the public school districts to build schools, and that the charter schools are taking advantage of these. The only advantage I see is you'd never see Kamau Independent School District or Schertz, SCU, CISD coming to us and wanting to build a school on a lot this small. It's not feasible. Charter school can do it because they can limit how many students, and so they can build a facility that will only take so many students, and they're allowed to do that. But I'm just trying to see how, I understand Mr. Sullivan's concerns, and I don't want to minimize them. But I'm having a hard time seeing how these exemptions are making it any easier, or to use his words, the charter school is taking advantage of these. And I'm just looking for some honest opinion, would it change anything if because the only thing I see is they've got to put in a few more trees and they've got to do some, landscaping. Honestly, I'm not real happy with the situation. I think, and my big argument is with TxDOT not granting them a driveway onto the access road. I just think that is, well, I can't use the word I want to use, okay? Because I see so much. And I think part of TxDOT's problem is they're separated somewhere north of us. There's a line, and that line says on this side it's San Antonio, on this side it's New Braunfels, and they do things differently. Okay, we see them up there. They want to turn down. They denied the access to the access road because it was too close to the intersection and the high-speed traffic, and yet they turn right around because I think it's the other office approved that driveway out of the QT on the corner of 3009 and Rips Chrysler, okay? And it just continues to boggle my mind. I guess it's kind of like the IRS. You've heard the old story. If you call the IRS 5 times with the same question, you get 5 different answers. That's TxDOT. I share the residents' concern up there about this project, and realistically, there's only one place for those cars to go, and that's back onto Fairlawn and around the traffic circle. But would it be any different if we were building a public school? You know, if, and I don't know, I think that's Comal County. I'm trying to remember that line. It's real close up there. But even, let's say SCU wants to go up there and build a 200-student kindergarten only, or what do they call it, pre-K? Would it be any different? And the answer is no.
No.
Okay? At least I think so.
Correct.
Anyway. Okay, guys, what do you think? Yes, I'm done. Thank you.
Did this come up in order to generate a change to an ordinance or a change to something else?
I think the intent was to discuss, because, yeah, the implication, I don't know if he says it implicitly or explicitly or not, but the idea was to amend the UDC to remove these exemptions.
Well, I think since the state considers a charter school a public school, I don't think we would get away with that. We'd have to treat all public schools the same because they're they're an entity of the state. But talking about the city, and when they come to the city, when they come to planning and engineering, and they come up with a building that's, let's just say it's going to house 1,000 people, you guys wouldn't approve that, I don't think. They're going to have they come to us yet with?
They're in the site plan certification phase.
A site plan. So we don't know what the building capacity is going to be, or how many students, how many teachers, we don't know that.
We don't have an approved number for anything like that.
So if they came to us with a design and it was some ridiculous number of students and ridiculous number of teachers, we're not mandated to approve that just because it's a public school, right? We can put restrictions on it.
Sure. I mean, they have to follow everything else in the IBC regarding whatever kind of qualifications or regulations they would have. And the parking study kind of based on, this is the number of kids we're providing, this is the codes that we're using, these are the studies that we're basing kind of our recommendation off of, has to be approved by our engineering department, by city staff. So the idea that it'd be the idea that we'd have to work forward to understand how many kids or teachers or whoever is going to be in that building to understand what they can do on site.
So I think if the residents of Riata are concerned, I think they're going to have to rely on the judgment and the skill of the city planners and engineers that they're not going to permit something on this lot that's going to be dangerous or overcrowded. I think the city's going to do their best to make sure that that lot, whatever's on that lot's going to be safe as it can be. So I'm not crazy about it being there anyway, but that's just me personally. We can't stop it, so I think it's going to go forward. I think it'd be better if the HOA let them cut across the median, but that's an HOA decision, so we'll leave that up to them.
I think back to one of your earlier points about what you were talking about, what was the end goal for kind of why we were bringing this up of changes to UDC or an ordinance or something like that. I think primarily from what we got out of it as staff is bringing forth kind of our rationale for why we've included charter schools under this kind of list of exemptions for the reasons we've just obviously stated within the presentation, not necessarily advocating for a specific change to a definition, advocating for a specific change to an ordinance, but seeking commission kind of thoughts on whether that rationale follows with you, whether you have different thoughts. I think that was the intent behind our workshop, not necessarily just to invoke change immediately.
Yes, I asked for it to be on the agenda primarily to try and understand, for you to do just what you did, to enumerate the exemptions, what they were, and the potential impact. And then, while I don't see it in Mr. Sullivan's current email, I thought somewhere, and maybe it was in his previous email, maybe it wasn't, but I think one of the reasons I wanted to discuss this tonight was the very question you're asking. Do we as a commission feel it's necessary to explore changes to the UDC to answer these concerns, I think is the way to put it. That was kind of my goal tonight. And there is no, this is not an action item, but, you know, certainly if we wanted something to go that way, we could ask staff to put it on another agenda. But that's kind of where I was coming from. Do we see the need to change anything? So, anybody else?
Well, and just a couple of more comments. And I know Clemens is an old school, and it's a landlocked school, but you know, we make comments like charter schools are often built on small lots with dense parking. Good Lord, what do you call Clemens? And you know, they got a brand new parking lot at Clemens. It's, you know, it's as dense as it can be, and heavy impervious cover. I don't think we're going to allow them to violate the impervious cover requirements, are we?
No.
Yeah, we're not going to do that. So I see his concerns, but I don't think we need to change anything. And even for this particular school, if we change things today, they would be grandfathered, wouldn't they?
I think from a staff perspective, I would argue that through the myriad of development meetings we've had with them, conversations, the preliminary plat, the assumptions that these exemptions would apply, I think that kind of regardless of what we do to decide going forward, whether you think kind of what we presented here is not really on the mark and that it should just from this point on be applicable to only schools within a public school district, we could potentially look at adding a definition for non-public schools or something that would just solidify kind of the opinion that we've gathered today. But I think regarding the existing schools and science and technology site, I would say, given that that's what we told them from the beginning, kind of we would own that, allow them to develop as we've told them they could, and then just move forward under the new assumptions of what those exemptions apply to. But again, open to suggestions.
And, you know, in our discussion of this item previously, it's temporary. The traffic issue is a temporary problem. Now, the problem is how temporary is temporary, because you know, there is on the master thoroughfare plan, there's a north-south, I'll call it a collector for lack of anything else, that runs between the commercially zoned properties and the residential properties. And the piece of land that's behind where this charter school wants to build is commercially zoned. So sometime in the future, and again, I wish we had a crystal ball, someone will want to develop that piece of property and at least cause a section, I think, of that roadway. Now, it's only going to lead back to Riata's traffic circle again, but certainly at a better, probably at a better angle or a better approach than they may get without it. And then someday that road will run all the way back to, I guess what we now call Cibolo Valley Drive. Okay, yeah. It just depends. I mean, look how fast Santikos, that whole development. I mean, who would have thought that Ritz Chrysler would connect to Cibolo Valley Drive this soon? I mean, that just almost came out of nowhere. So we don't really know, but it is. There is relief sometime in the future. I'm hearing. I haven't heard from everybody, but I'm beginning to feel that the consensus of the commission is that there's no need to look at making any changes to the UDC at this time. Okay. So before we close this out, does anyone else want to comment, ask questions? I know I did a lot of talking, so.
I thought there was some changes in the new state law we had to adjust.
Sorry, what?
There's some changes in state law that we had to adjust our,
Well, I think we've made those, I think Commissioner Greenwald's referring back to the bills that removed some of our architectural design.
Right, the exterior construction material standards?
But
Yeah, so here, let me,
but we can still require the articulations and things like that?
on public schools?
Well, no, I mean in general.
Oh, in general, yeah. So the articulation, so the way this table works is it's tailored to that GB zone subject site. So these are the articulations that would be required of, if like the exemptions weren't applied to the school, and then this is if they were. So yeah, like I was talking about when I listed the total, the total exemptions, what's left of this one is basically just articulations, because that's all that's left within 2195 now that the material standards and the glazing standards were moved for the House Bill 2437 in the 86 legislature a couple years ago.
But no one has exempted either public school districts or charter and private schools from building and fire codes. And that is there are limits in there based on occupant load, how many students and staff. So there are constraints about type of material you can use, how big you can build. There's still a lot of code requirements that have to be met that are going to impact the design of this particular facility. So, are we done with this one? Yes? All right, thank you, sir. Thank you. What did I do with my agenda here? Okay, item 8. A, request by commissioners to place items on a future planning and zoning agenda. Anything for the future, commissioners? Okay, hearing none. Announcements by commissioners. Anything, want to share anything with anyone with the commission? And that's a no. All right, so item C, announcements by city staff.
Just one quick one, the site plan that was listed on the agenda. So it's Corbett Booster Station, Lot 1, Block 1. They did an amending site plan. So this is the city-owned property that the Corbett elevated tank was built on. So the amending site plan was for the SSLGC line that you can see in red, and then they were adding a terminus building for that SSLGC line. So that is all it did, was literally give them the ability through, after the amending site plan, through building permits, to build that building for the SSLGC line. That's it.
Okay, thank you. And before we adjourn, Commissioner Greenwald, did you have something? No? Okay. All right. We have no further business. This meeting's adjourned.